Welcome back to another episode of JavaScript Jabber. This week on our panel is Dan Shapir.
Hello from warm and sunny Tel Aviv.
And I'm Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs. We're doing a crossover episode this week. We're here with the guys from Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot. I don't know who we should introduce first. Let's go in alphabetical order, and let's have Charles the Third. I know that's an inside joke, but go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll let Robbie introduce himself.
Sounds great. Yeah. So our one listener knows me as Charles William Carpenter III, and friends and colleagues know me as Chuck as well. But for all intents and purposes and lack of confusion, we'll call me Charles III here. So I'm co-host of Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot. So avid whiskey enthusiast, technologist, a lot of front-end JavaScript work across my career. And that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Robbie, Go ahead.
Hey, I'm Robbie Wagner. I go by Robbie the Wagner online because Robbie Wagner was taken everywhere. So that's my handle everywhere. I do this podcast with Chuck. We drink some whiskey, talk some tech, etc. I do a lot of Ember. I'm like the only guy still doing it. I have been doing Ember since 2012. The community's gotten a lot smaller, but I still love it, and I'm having fun doing that.
I would actually, that's something I'd like to discuss if we have some time along the way. I mean, how is Ember doing these days and whatnot? That said, I'm also annoyed about the fact that I don't have whiskey right now.
We didn't prepare you appropriately.
Episode,
yeah,
exactly.
We'll have to rectify that in the future.
Yeah,
I'm the only teetotaler here because I don't drink.
I have a lot of mediocre whiskey substitutes to recommend to you, so don't worry.
And one good I'll be like, okay, that was interesting. I'll never drink it again.
Water.
There you go. You'd be surprised, actually. There's been decent feedback on some of them from folks who are also not drinkers, and a decent flavor there, and they give it a little bit of spice to give you kind of a faux burn as it goes down the throat. But in general, I hear it's fairly tasty.
Oh, cool. So I kind of want to back up just a little bit and talk a little bit about your show. How did you guys get started with this? Like, what was the idea? What was the plan?
Yeah. Do you want to go with it, Robbie?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was basically we had some extra cash and wanted a way for whiskey to be a business expense. So that was kind of how we started. And the first, 10 or so episodes, we didn't really know what we were doing. We were just kind of like, let's drink whiskey and have fun and whatever. And we've slowly kind of evolved from there and gotten more legit about it, and like had, prominent guests on and gotten more serious with our topics. But we keep it pretty lighthearted still usually. And I think it gives a unique format because people get a little flustered. Sometimes they drink a little too much, and sometimes they have a really fun time.
Yeah, I mean, whiskey arbitrage is essentially how I present it initially. And then conversely, there's a couple of different things that go into the concept. I mean, one aspect being like that we wanted to hear something different from some of the people that we're hearing on podcasts,
right?
Especially folks who have a particular project that they want to pitch and talk about. You can tell that they sort of have the same notes that they take along to each show, and it kind of goes down that path. And unless they get some interesting questions, you're just sort of getting their marketing pitch. So whiskey presents a little bit of unintended duress through that conversation sometimes. So, you take it very casual. You start with the whiskey, you get a little of that effect, and then you just kind of start talking as people. So it keeps it a bit more casual. I would say part of the idea, or the way that I think about it, is if you've ever seen that YouTube show Hot Ones, how Sean Evans is an excellent interviewer, and I wouldn't necessarily say that of myself per se, but the fact that he can move through like an interesting interview and present increased levels of duress over time. And we're not trying to have people under duress, but we do loosen them up, and then it becomes more of a fireside chat. The fire's in their mouth and belly, I guess.
No, that makes sense. And that's generally what I've kind of hoped that we do here too, is just kind of have more of a conversation among people as opposed to and sometimes we do we wind up walking into and then walking through the pitch that they have, but
yeah, I just as a side comment, I used to work at Wix, and one of the good things about working at Wix is that at least for a certain time we had liquor budget as part of our office expenses. Yeah, it was interesting time. Some of the best whiskey I've drunk.
Interesting.
Yeah, we had a couple people from Wix on our show, and they were mentioning similar things, that they're very into alcohol there.
Right.
And other things.
Yeah. That was one of the episodes we recorded at Render ATL, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was like kind of on the fly.
Yeah, it was the same weekend that I was at JS Nation and React's Summit. So,
well, I've just submitted a talk to Render ATL next year. Let's see what happens.
I saw the pictures from Render ATL and stuff, and I was like, that looks like fun. And, seeing people that I know, just like I was seeing people that I know, in person in Amsterdam. It was like, it's too bad.
Yeah. They're tough. Weekend. They're tough. They're only allowing one submission per speaker.
Oh, wow.
Well, I think they're new to that process, so you can understand where they want to just so many people go there. It is a huge conference, and I can't imagine it stagnating or getting smaller. I mean, it is a very unique, almost like cultural experience. And so if you're expecting, if you have 3,000 plus attendees, and then you're expecting, there were probably at least 100 speakers last year or this past year.
Wow.
I think it was 80.
Was it? Yeah, I thought it was around 100. So give or take, I suppose. And the tracks are concurrent, and so there's 4 to 6 rooms, a main stage kind of thing. That's a lot of talks, and probably a lot of people submitting to get in on that. So
it's also one of the fewer conferences in the US that I saw that actually fully cover travel expenses. Nice. For some reason, conferences in Europe do, and those in the States are less likely to, at least per my experience.
We believe in a thing called capitalism.
Yeah.
Isn't capitalism about getting paid for what you do?
Right. What it doesn't always about sharing.
It's about keeping money.
It's about keeping the money.
Okay.
It depends. I mean, it's down to incentives, right? And so if they can get away with not paying it, then they probably won't. If they can't get the people that they want, then they might start paying for it. So
I just got back home from Front Zurich, Front Conference Zurich, which was an excellent conference, by the way. So props to them. And they actually even give a stipend to speakers beyond the actual covering of expenses, which is unfortunately even less common.
Yeah, I've been to some that do one or the other, but not so many that do both, unless it was paid for by like Microsoft or something like that. And I'm kind of curious that as to how that goes. As far as I mean, what was your experience there? Did you do your live show as a session, or was it just recording in a room, or how did that work?
It was recording in a room, so we had space in their media room, and we had a couple of things planned, and then many things not planned. So we were just kind of ready to go on the fly, and we were just trying to interact with speakers. And then what we learned later was that folks who were involved, like speakers and other folks involved in the conference themselves, found out that we were recording this whiskey podcast and that we had bottles of whiskey available that we were sharing with folks. So it became like kind of a little underground speakeasy for people through the afternoon. It'd swing in, watch us a little bit. Can I pour one of these? Well, okay. And then, so it actually was really interesting, just because of the nature of how on the fly things occurred in that. But yeah, we had a big banner and our equipment and stuff, and we just set up in a media room that we mostly had to ourselves.
So did they invite you to come, or did you invite yourself, or?
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious.
So we were not invited. We did like a paid thing with them. I think we could have snuck in there and done whatever we want, just because it's so big and so much is going on. But Yeah, we weren't one of the invited guests though. We just
Okay.
did a paid thing.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I've gone to several conferences. Like, so when I went to the one in Amsterdam recently, they paid for my hotel
JS
and
Nation, right?
JS Nation. Yeah, they paid for my hotel and airfare, and they had food at the event, so it was just a couple of days extra I was there. Microsoft, they used to do it where they would pay airfare, hotel, and food and everything, and then we would come. But they had a number of podcasters, right, that were coming, and they actually had booths set up, and they would work with us to figure out who our guests would be. And so we basically just showed up and recorded and walked away with an SD card with recordings on it. JS Nation, they I really appreciated the opportunity, but they didn't do a great job lining me up with the guests or giving me space to record in. And they had a couple of other people there, and they just kind of figured it out. So we all just kind of figured it out together. But that's one thing that I have figured out, is that if they don't know how they're doing it, a lot of times I can insert myself into the process and say, okay, this is how we're going to do this, and that way they get a good showing out of people showing up and whatnot. But yeah, anyway, it's interesting. So when you say it was a paid thing, you paid them to go? Okay.
Yeah, we were
Yeah.
sponsors of the conference. Yeah.
Okay. And I've done
Yeah.
that too. And then they gave me sponsored space on the floor, and we just recorded on the floor. I've done that as well at other conferences.
I'm kind of surprised that more conferences don't do this in a more organized sort of a way, like as a way to promote the conference, contact certain podcasts, have the speakers be guests
Mhm.
on those podcasts ahead of the conference, talk about what they are going to talk about and stuff like that as a way to get, as an incentive for more people to sign up for the conference, I would think.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great idea. I think, I mean, I would welcome doing this more. We really weren't
Mhm.
sure how things were going to go. And then we did the Ember Conf also, but we did that as a session and more as
Right.
speakers. And we have a travel setup that is pretty solid now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ironed it out through a couple of like both those conferences. And then we did an offsite in Portland another time too, in like this whiskey library. So we just thought that was on brand. So I would love to do more live
Yeah.
stuff at conferences and would definitely welcome that. And I can see it's a great idea. Conversely, like conference organizers sponsor an episode. Come on,
Yep.
let's talk about your
Mhm.
thing. And I think that would be cool. We can do it in our format.
Yeah, I've been reaching out to some conferences and started putting this together. And instead of just saying, "Hey, have JavaScript Jabber or Ruby Rogues or React Roundup or one of our other shows show up," it's, "Hey, yeah, let's set up some space. Let's put all this stuff together, and then let's invite 3, 4, 5 podcasts, right? Depending on what your budget is and what you want to cover, and see what they're willing to do, right? Because yeah, I mean, you guys sponsored to show up at Render ATL, and so um I'm assuming some of the other podcasters out there are willing to put some skin in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Especially
but
if they
I'm
know
even
that.
thinking like sort of a package deal because
Yeah,
both sides are getting something out of it. I
yeah,
mean,
well,
if you make sure that the episodes with speakers air
yeah,
in advance, you're actually promoting the conference. So it's
yep.
it's promotion that works both ways, it seems to me.
Yeah,
No,
I
I
agree with
agree
that.
with you, and that's more or less how the Microsoft stuff worked. Except we didn't do it in advance; we just recorded it, and they came out afterward. But for them, it was branding that made sense for Microsoft, right? Because we were not interviewing just people speaking; we were interviewing Microsoft engineers and employees, and then occasionally we'd get somebody else.
So do they reach out to you for that, or are you proactive in finding that kind of engagement?
So the Microsoft thing, the way that worked out, the short story is that I wound up speaking at a .NET conference that had an enthusiast on their staff for Ruby, and he talked them into doing a Ruby track. And so we went to that event. It was in Vancouver, and .NET Rocks was doing a panel at the conference about agile development. And so they looked around at everybody and said, we all do Microsoft flavored Agile. Chuck is a Ruby guy, and so his take on things is pretty different. And so they had me on the panel, and I got to know Richard and Carl under those circumstances. And so when the opportunity came up, they ran it through Richard and Carl, and so they reached out to us to have our iOS show and JavaScript Jabber show up at Microsoft Build. And after that, they just had us at all of their events. And so that's how that worked out. The JS Nation one, they reached out to us to kind of do some cross promotion, and I pitched them on coming and doing podcasts at the event, and that's how that kind of wound up working. But yeah, I completely agree with you guys. I think there is some way that it works or could work where, yeah, everybody gets what they want, and the podcasters mostly have their way paid to the event, because it makes a ton of financial sense to the conference organizers to have you there. And so I'd love to sit down and just figure that out and reach out to a whole bunch of people and just say, hey, are you interested in doing this? So that I can say, hey, we've got 6, 7, 10 podcasts that could all come.
And again, a lot of these, when you record at the conference, which is obviously very interesting and creates engagement for next time, but that's it. It's an engagement for next time. I'm thinking that, you can have people that will speak at the conference coming in ahead of time, because very often those conferences, especially now, in this post-COVID period, not all conferences are able to sell all the tickets easily in advance.
Right.
Anyway,
we did that with JS Nation, but we didn't do it well. And I have a page of notes on, hey, here's how we do it again next time.
Yeah, which brings
I would
me.
say it's twofold. It's like, let's come to your conference and be, there and recording with folks there that comes out after the event. But I think that there's a buildup that occurs, and you have XYZ person who will either be at the conference or is part of the conference organization, and they come on, and then they sponsor an episode and they talk about their thing, and we have that kind of ongoing discourse that continues up until the event. And then you continue that by saying, this is what happened. We recorded there. This was so exciting. Look for it next year.
Yep.
Yeah. Which brings me to another topic, which I think is really interesting for me, is how do you get the guests for your podcast? What's your process?
It's funny. It's
funny.
It's a lot easier than it should be, I think. I guess, for the most part, we just, it's basically why I have a Twitter account. I just message people and say, do you want to be on here? You like
I think you mean X?
X, whatever. I'm whatever. Bird thing, former bird thing.
I still call it Twitter. It's just, everybody knows what you mean.
Yeah, if you say X, they're like, is this a family-friendly show or no? It just
I just changed my the contact me thing on my slide deck from the Twitter bird to an X, and everybody was laughing when I showed that. So
yeah, I can kind of see that. I just put an X through the bird or something, people will get it.
Yeah, I would just say it's because I have people that want me to help them start a podcast, and they're, how do you get these people? And that's been my experience. 99% of the time, I just ask them. And sometimes it's a month or 2 or 3 because they're busy. But most people, it's like, hey, here's our calendar link, and it sorts itself out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
most people are into it.
Yeah, we do the same, although we also get, we're established enough, I guess, that also some people contact us and ask to actually participate on the show. And funnily enough, one of the guests that we had on our show, which, is I guess a headliner, which is Dan Abramov, to speak about React Server Components. He actually contacted me to come on the show rather than the other way around. So people were asking, how did you get Dan? And I said, funny you should ask.
Yeah, we get some of those. I don't know if you get all the junk emails. Hi, we work for interview company, and we're trying to get someone. We get a ton of those, but occasionally, we'll have somebody float through that's released a book or something else, and they're an interesting enough person or enough people know who they are to where,
Yeah. I mean, it just started out with like people we would read and, articles you'd read, people you might follow a little bit on Twitter or whatever. And we're just like, we find them interesting. Let's ask them.
It was all Ember people to start.
Yeah, well, you were
because I knew
like
all of
like
the Ember people.
Ember people. I was like, I can't talk about this again.
And you have the extra incentive of telling them if you come on the show, we'll send you some whiskey.
Right. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which that doesn't hurt either. Again, that's all part of the arbitrage part.
Yeah.
By the way, I actually think that the situation with Twitter is making things more complicated because I know a good number of people who are intentionally no longer on that platform. So some people are more difficult to contact and reach out to than they were in the past. Yeah, some dead accounts. Most people don't remove their accounts. Their accounts just stay there. You just DM them and they don't answer. And if you then somehow reach them and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I just don't look at Twitter anymore." So,
Yeah. I haven't run into that too much, but I've seen where people like leave.
It has happened though.
And they come back and they were like, "Oh, I went to Mastodon and then nobody was there, or it was a small circle and blue sky and
so for a while I was adding things on my about me slide in my my talks at conferences, and it got silly where I had like 4 links and I said, yeah, but I'm actually not there. So I wilted it all back down to X. Whatever we think about the guy who's running it, either good or bad, I'm just there for the people I know.
Yeah, like it's more about the community than that. Yeah, and I had rage quit social media, I don't know, like 5-6 years ago. I just was tired of that, or tired of arguing politics with my father-in-law or something of that nature. And I was just like, I'm just tired of the whole thing.
And so now you do it on Thanksgiving instead of on social media?
Basically, yeah. Thanksgiving and Christmas, and that's the only time. Or we just say, you can't talk about these things in our house. It's just not.
And does that actually work? My experience is that it doesn't.
No, you've not met my wife. It does work. She will get louder or make him leave. So
okay, so she's with you on those agendas.
Yeah, well, so it would be fun. I mean, I don't know if you want to go down this path, but the short of it, the TLDR, is that I wouldn't even really argue like politics. There would be like a statement or some meme put up, and I would go to like Senate.gov and look at voting records and be like, oh, looks like this wasn't true on this issue. And he would just respond with, well, you have your opinion, I have mine. I'm like, it's not opinion. It's just information. There's no alternative facts here, just the fact. Anyway, so
yeah.
No, it's and that's been an issue sometimes, just around, somebody will throw something out on the show, and we just try to steer clear of a lot of that stuff, right? Because we're talking about technology and things. Yeah.
I don't actually recall any situation of politics or stuff like that on our show.
I could go back and find you instances, but most of it occurred before you were on the show.
Yeah, I think so.
And aside from whether you feel adamantly enough to be on this particular, Twitter X platform or not because of your personal feelings about the fellow who owns it, aside from that, technology is kind of agnostic to all of those things anyway. So that's a beautiful thing to it. We argue about things like tabs and spaces or rebase or merge. And
rebase and merge is spicy.
Who's the smartest person in the room kind of thing? I don't know.
Yeah, we have had people who worked on specific presidential campaigns say, hey, we want to come talk about the technology we did on the campaign. And I had to, it never materialized, and basically that boiled down to, look, you're going to come talk about the technology and not about the campaign. And they weren't happy with that. And so it's like, look, I'm not looking to evangelize anybody, right? I have my opinions. I'm very politically involved in Utah, and right, but people aren't listening to the show so that I can tell them what I think about that stuff.
Right. It's not. It's not exactly the forum, and I completely agree with that. And great that that you have those feelings and opinions, but that you can
Right.
separate those and maintain that standard within this, because that is, at the end of the day, what we're doing here, right? We're talking about the intersect of things within technology and the specific technology aspects of it. I mean, when you're ready to start the Rust track in your podcast, you let me know, because we gotta, work on getting everybody off of Ruby and onto Rust, right?
Yeah, let's argue about that. No,
See, we have other things. It's totally fine.
It's true, but I have actually been considering the next two languages I'm going to be covering on the show. Incidentally, well, one of them is not a language. We're starting a Python show, and then we're also starting a game dev show.
Is that the one that's not a language?
Robbie has problems with anything that doesn't have like ending operators, clear ending, no brackets, no.
I gotta have braces. You
need your braces, and you need semicolons. You just I don't know.
Yep.
But I like Python, so
there's this meme about writing Java, I think, in a way that looks like Python code, or was it the other way around? Like how do you format it in a way that you don't see all the semicolons and the braces?
That's funny.
Yeah.
So one thing, getting back into the podcast a little bit, is I'm a little curious. Are there certain topics that you try not to cover? I mean, are you pretty open as far as web stuff, or?
We're pretty open, and so we've tried to be diverse in other sides of web. It's usually always web specific, so we're talking about being on the web.
But it can be like tools for building stuff on the web too,
right?
Yeah, and like other folks that are involved. Like we've spoken with recruiter and analysts, and just in other parts of like making this thing. And I just think we had a lot of opinions around hiring and the way that has changed, flipped on its head over the last 6 months to a year, I would suppose. And so I thought that was just interesting. Yeah.
So hiring is no longer broken?
Oh, I would say it's always been broken. It's always been broken. The difference is
a different kind of broken.
It's not broken in a different way.
Yeah, the power dynamic has flipped, and so it's become more broken, I think.
From my perspective, the power dynamic flipped, and then it flipped again.
I would love to see the other side of that flip, because I feel like it's really in favor of the employers at this point.
What I mean is that I'm looking at it from the perspective of how things are in Israel. And also I'm old, so I'm experienced. So I don't really have the junior experience. Although my son is now starting to get into the market, so I guess I'll experience what juniors get, their experiences through him. But what I'm trying to say is that something like 3 years ago, it was an employees market. Everybody was chasing you, and now it's certainly for juniors, and also but starting to even impact seniors. It's more of the power is more on the side of the prospective employers.
Yeah, 100%. Processes have become more challenging, I would say, for no other reason than to try and weed people out. Obviously, their applicant pools are crazy, and then I think salaries are being affected by that as well.
Yeah, I do believe, though, that there are a lot of things people can do to make their situation better and make themselves stand out a whole lot more, and so that it's not as, I guess in some ways it's arguing semantics, but where you're more likely to wind up in that top tier of the pool that they're actually going to really look at, or things like that go beyond having 10 years experience, right? And so you can do things as a junior developer to make yourself stand out, where they're actually going to go, they don't check all the boxes, but there's enough here to make me really think about bringing them in and seeing what the story is. So
I remember at Wix, this designer that wanted to get hired actually did a chalk drawing in the parking lot underneath the windows of the offices.
Nice.
Wow.
Like writing "hire me" and then doing a lot of art around it. And to be
Did they
honest,
get
I don't
hired?
know if it worked or not, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think it did get him an interview. So
Oh well,
Yeah.
at least got him into the
Yeah.
into the candidate pool or
Yeah.
something. Yeah, I mean, I think that if you want to work one specific place, you got to really work hard
Yep.
to make that happen. If you just want to get hired, the problem is that you can't really afford to put that kind of effort into every single application.
Right.
So then I guess the effort goes more around making yourself stand out.
Yeah, showing up in the right places. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah,
I definitely know about people who wanted to get hired by Google or Meta that went to amazing lengths in order to achieve that, doing courses on getting hired and
Oh, wow.
preparing for weeks on end just in order to pass the exams. I don't know. I've never been willing to put in that amount of effort just in order to get in the
Well,
past the initial interview. I don't know. It seemed kind of ridiculous to me.
Obviously the financial incentives are there if you do get through that, but then conversely, like you go through all of this training to get through the hiring process, and then the job you're going to do, I would say probably 99% of the time, doesn't reflect what you had to do to get the job.
Oh
right?
yeah,
You mean
for
your
sure.
job isn't just
Now we're
going
back
on
to why
leak
it's
code and
broken.
solving stuff?
Right, exactly. And those are things that were always broken. The
Well,
problem is that
maybe
those hiring
there.
practices have become more pervasive in other places that don't end up giving you the same financial incentive, though, also.
Yeah, maybe what they're testing for though isn't actually the knowledge that you're studying, rather it's your ability to study and your willingness to put in the work. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I'm not sure. Don't look behind the curtain. There's no man behind the green curtain. That's all I know.
Right.
Yeah. It's all broken anyway because it depends on who your interviewers are. Like, they may
Yeah.
all ask you the same algorithm questions or whatever, but they might be looking for you to solve it in different ways, or they might ask you behavioral questions that you answer differently. And like, we've talked about this before, I think, where like, there'll be 7 people that interview you in a loop, and then like one
Right.
guy's like, well, I didn't like the way that he answered this question. Like, not that it was wrong, I just didn't like it, and then shuts you down. You don't get it. It's like, well, what if you did really well on the other 6? Like, it's not a good
Yeah.
process at all.
Or you have somebody that just wants you to make them feel good. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so arbitrary.
All too often recently, I'm seeing situation where I hear about people interviewing for a job, and in the middle of their interview, they hear that the company that they're interviewing for has just laid off 15% of their workforce.
Right.
And so then,
and then you ask yourself, what happens now?
Yeah, well, I wonder if they're trying to just do a workforce cost reduction. Oh, we just laid off people who have been here for a while, and merit raises and all of those kinds of things. We can hire someone in to do the job for a 30% cut,
right,
or something. Capitalism again rears its head from time to time. It's not about people or community. It's about shareholders.
I think it's short-sighted
on the cap. I think it's short-sighted though on the capitalist end, right? If you have people that are contributing at a high level and you're paying them a high salary and they're worth it, right? Then you're a stupid capitalist if you're laying them off just because of some baseline number.
Yeah, but the problem is that when you're a big enough company, you stop looking at individuals.
Yeah.
It's a
I guess what
thing.
I'm arguing is that it's not capitalism itself that's the problem. Then there are these other factors, right?
Certainly, and I'm generalizing anyway, and not that I'm necessarily I'm not trying to come off as anti-capitalist or opportunity per se. Just that I think I'm just being cynical from time to time when you start to see this across the board.
Yeah.
Now, when you get in there in the lines, I mean, I have been in companies before and been part of processes where there's been a mandate to reduce workforce, and you have to look at people and say, oh my gosh, who can we afford to lose and who can we not?
Right.
Oh, I've been there.
Yes.
I've literally done it back in 2008.
Right, exactly. So,
I was the VP of R&D for a smallish company, managing some 30-something people, and I got an instruction from the CEO that you need to reduce our salary expenses by 30%.
Right. You have to figure out how you can do that. And
I've been on the other end of that.
Right. And who knows what the factors were that went into that. So anyway, just not trying to drag the whole thing down per se, but just,
Yeah.
just clarifying
let's
that I was
make
being more
all our
cynical than
listeners,
anything else.
Yeah, let's make all our listeners feel down.
Right.
So
so let's switch topic.
Yeah. Let's regress back to the podcast for 1 second, because on ours, one of the things we like to do is the opening of the bottle and the pouring as part of our sound effects, but it's not really like Foley or anything. It's just like this. Yes, that's me opening a Diet Coke.
Yeah, and that didn't sound like whiskey,
No, but you're getting some sound effects, right? So anyway, I just wanted to provide you some of that. That's just a fun thing we do on ours.
So you're just putting that right in front of your microphone and just
yeah,
yep,
letting it pick up on
people
that. So
think
it's real
that we
every time.
are using fake sound effects or something, but nope, we just do it.
So I'm going to take this opportunity because that reminded me. So I actually, what was it, 2 days ago, we popped a bottle of champagne because my friend Vitaly Friedman from Smashing Magazine recently got married. So
nice.
We raised a toast to him and his wife who were there at the conference. And that was really nice. They brought along a bottle of champagne. So
that's really fun. I love that. Yeah, I mean, we've really pigeonholed ourselves into the whiskey thing. And while there are many kinds of whiskey, I always wonder someday, is it just going to be, are we going to kind of run out of options? I don't know.
No.
Probably
no,
not.
because we started too late.
There are always more blends to try, aren't there?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. And we've tried a lot of things. Oh, actually, we did one year, we did like a advent calendar. And so we had 24 different little bottles. And we would do like
that was
2 or 3 per episode. It was so much. And so we tried.
If I may ask, what is the most expensive whiskey that you've had on your show?
On the show,
was it the Magellan or something more than that?
Something that was about $200 or $300.
Yeah,
for a bottle.
So
yeah, and we didn't have a guest on that one. I think that was still more early days, so not per se that we wouldn't consider that path, but most of the time we're usually in anywhere from like $50 to $100. So it's like we want things to be approachable because we've started publishing early the whiskey that we're going to review on the next released episode. So just because a few different people said, oh, we wish we knew and we could kind of like have it with you while you're trying it. So I was like, okay, sure, let's go down that path. We wanted it to be a bit more approachable, but
you can try to get sponsorships from some distilleries.
Right, exactly. I think we're going to need the both of you with on our marketing team to help us. Chuck here is like, you paid for a conference? Are you sure that was a good idea? I was like, wait, at the time that was a good idea. Now I think it's a bad idea.
No, it depends on what you're trying to get out of it, but
we were just trying to figure out if that's something we wanted to do and just experiment a little bit. And again, putting together my travel kit was kind of a fun experiment as well. Although we've started to upgrade a few other items such as like lighting and camera now. Yeah. And so who knows how much of that still works in that same way. But I don't know. I like the idea of being somewhat on the go. I'm not, I have a tiny office here that I record in. So anytime I can get out of this thing and do work elsewhere is kind of nice.
Yeah, I hear that. It's funny. I'm moved into a bigger room.
I sit in whichever kid isn't in the house at this point in time because my wife has taken over my office. So
we all do what we have to do. Now. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Robbie has been like on the road recording for quite some time because they sold their house and then started house searching for a bit. So then they were like in a family home and then was like homeless for a little while. Not really, but
so you recorded on the street?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man on the street.
I was in my parents'
in your car.
Try this whiskey.
What under a bridge.
Yes. Yeah, we should try.
That would have been fun to do. Yeah, get a hotspot going on my phone and just.
And your whiskey was in a paper bag.
Yeah, it might have been something else, Mad Dog 2020. We're really highbrow in this show, so our show, not yours.
Yeah. So what does your travel kit look like? I'm curious.
So we have the Rodecaster Pro, and I got like a bag for that holds 2 mics.
Okay.
And then so we do that, and I've got like some of those small like Gator mic stands. So I still take like the cage for our mics and our same mics.
Oh,
what
wow.
are our mics again, Robbie?
The Electro Voice RE20.
RE20. Okay.
Beautiful mic. That's what I'm talking on to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a mic is key. So we take that, take the cage with it, and then I've just got some like heavier desktop ones that we can use. So mostly between that, it ends up working out pretty good. I mean, AirPod Max headphones, but
well, the headphones
most of the time we don't even monitor. Yeah,
the headphones we had a problem with because we got a bunch of the adapters for the like the Lightning cord, and they didn't do
Apple
audio
official.
The other way or something. Like it was for like something else. So then we just used one and like got all our levels right, and then just stopped listening to it and just hoped for the best.
But I'd say like desktop stands that are heavy enough and that Rodecaster, and we'll just record on little SD cards.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. So you record on the
video
card?
At all?
Yeah, the Rodecaster will record on the card. If we're like on the road, then we're in person. So.
So do you do video at all on the road?
You can't count on having good enough upstream connection.
Exactly.
I guess.
Right. Yeah. And so we'd rather have that.
Riverside's also hard for like it does not let you do local recordings. Like
no, it's not great for that.
Yeah. I also had an issue with it before before I got my fiber. Chuck would have to pause me each my upload for every episode. Otherwise, it would more or less saturate my entire network connection in the house while it was trying to upload. It's full speed now. Finally, we don't need to do that anymore. I'm listening to all you guys discuss your microphones. I'm just using this dinky microphone on my headset.
You do you. I think we've started geeking out on it. So it's probably more for us than anything. Like it's much like the lighting and everything else. It's something to kind of play with.
No, but funnily enough, when I had the AC going, Chuck actually could hear the sound through this mic because I changed my headphones. So it turns out that there is value in having
these
good
directional
equipment.
mics are really nice, especially when you're at a conference and recording. And while you'll kind of get faint background noise, it does a great job of picking up the speech there and kind of filtering out as much as it can, like all the background stuff. So it's really helpful in those circumstances.
Or when my daughter
Chuck,
walks
you'd ask
in
about
here.
video.
No, there's actually, I think, even a bit of an advantage to having a slight amount of background noise in a conference because it makes you sound like you're there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you might be back in your house just saying that you're at the conference.
Right. Do you guys publish video for any of your? Yes. Okay. Because
but usually not in real time.
Yeah, it hasn't been in real time.
Occasionally we do.
So, and maybe we'll get into this. I'm curious. Go ahead and answer the video question first, and then I'll talk a little bit about where we're heading with some of that.
Yeah, we just recently started doing video. Did we do a couple of Rodecaster ones or not Riverside ones first, and then we did some on the road, but then we were just using a little Opal 4K camera.
Those were the first ones.
Yeah, which is nice, but if you don't have good lighting, it really can't pick up hardly anything. And also at a distance with guests, it's not the greatest. It's a nice webcam for Zoom and things like that, but so that's basically why we decided to do some camera upgrades to make that, especially on the road, it's going to make that a lot nicer experience.
Right. Yeah. So it was a year or so ago we started publishing the videos on YouTube. So was it last week? No, it was 2 weeks ago. I was at Podcast Movement in Denver, and I talked to all kinds of people about all kinds of things. One of the things that just kept coming up over and over and over again as far as growing the show. So back in the day when we started JavaScript Jabber, which was like 11 years ago, we just grew through word of mouth, right? Because we were one of the only games in town. And so, people were figuring out that they could listen to podcasts, and then they would go, "Oh, I'm interested in JavaScript," and they'd find us. And then their friends would tell them, "Hey, I'm listening to this awesome JavaScript show." And so people would go and find us, right? The market's still growing, podcasts are still growing, but it's not the same. And so when I was talking to people about growth, one of the major strategies is actually live streaming. And so if you live stream your show, and some of that is just you're boosting your numbers because people are going to watch part of it live, and so you can count all of your live streams off of LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, whatever else you're streaming to. But the other thing is that a lot of the podcasters I talked to saw their audio numbers off of their hosting, and I don't know if you're hosting through like Libsyn or Blueberry or somebody else. Ours are
We use
hosted on
Spotify for
Breadcircle.
podcasters.
Okay, well, we're on Spotify as well, but
yeah,
yeah,
it's
have
what
a
used to be
hosting thing, too.
Anchor. It
Yeah.
used to be
Yeah, it
called
used to be
Anchor. They
Anchor.
acquired Anchor.
Okay. But yeah, so they see their audio numbers go up too off of that, right? Off of the live streams, and then having them available on the video platforms and social media platforms. And so I'm actually working on figuring a lot of that stuff out now. I've actually been negotiating a network hosting deal with StreamYard, so we're probably going to switch off of Riverside. But yeah, so that's been one of the things that we've been looking at is just okay, so live streaming them out. Some of our guests like to have them edited after the fact and have some of the stuff removed, and then on the audio end, a lot of people like having it cleaned up, mastered, remove awkward pauses, things like that. And so we'll still keep doing that, and we'll keep posting, the finished episode on YouTube and things like that. One thing that you can do on YouTube, though, is you can actually go and re-upload the video after the fact. And so, you'll have the raw video up until then. But there are some pieces we have to figure out too, right? So our sponsors, right? Our sponsors have been inserted after the fact. And if we're doing a live deal and we want to sell sponsorships on those, then we're going to have to figure out doing live reads on the shows. Right. So there's some things to figure out, but that's been kind of the major way that people have been pushing it forward is doing the live streams. And then, yeah, you go back and you do the YouTube magic to make it show up. Right. So YouTube will promote it and people will share it, and you have all your hashtags and everything else. So we're learning that now. But yeah, the video has been a major, major arena of growth with podcasting over the last year or two. And I guess the other piece of that is it's somewhat generational. So, I'm old. I'm not as old as Dan, but I'm old. And, so, me being in my early 40s, when I started listening to podcasts, it was nice because I could listen to them on my commute. I could listen to it while I was mowing the lawn. I could listen to it, during doing all these other things. But like my kids, I have a 17-year-old son, is my oldest. He's much less interested in audio only content, right? And so, picking up
The
kind of
TikTok generation.
the younger millennials and the older Gen Z, they're much more interested in the video content, and they will sit and watch people talk to each other. And so where I wasn't as interested in that. And so that's why they're seeing the growth there, is because YouTube put together some podcast focused pieces to their platform, so you can change your playlists now into podcasts. And then the other piece of it is that more and more of the folks that are 10, 15, 20 years younger than I am are much more interested in consuming video. And so they'll go watch a live stream on Twitter, they'll go watch a live stream on YouTube or Facebook or whatever.
Here's the
they'll
thing,
go
though.
watch content on TikTok. And so that's where you're picking up new listeners, is you're picking up younger listeners that way.
Interesting.
Here's the thing, though, at least for me, maybe because, again, like you said, I'm old, but I can't watch something certainly something that's has significant content, and do some other thing at the same time.
True.
I don't know,
Right.
maybe do my in-house cycling, something like that. But with a podcast, and I literally do stuff and listen to podcasts. I can jog, I
Yeah.
can shop, I can, I don't know, drive somewhere. These are things that I cannot do and watch a video. So
And
it
I think,
serves a totally different purpose for me.
Well, it
yeah,
sounds like
but
Robbie's the only one that can really speak to this context then, because I'm going
What
to
do
be
you mean?
46 in a few weeks, and same deal. Like
you're
I want
older
to be
than my
doing
wife. That is
things.
old.
Yeah. He, I
Yeah,
roll
I
with
hate
it.
watching videos too, though. So I
No,
can't
I
even
hear
really.
you.
Yeah,
But
like
I
I would mow and listen to podcasts all the
But I'm
time.
down to
Or,
like put content in other
yeah.
places if people want to check it out. Like if that's something that there's demand for, I'm like open to trying it out. I mean, we just basically push some stuff to
Yeah,
YouTube, and
you can talk about
we
tech,
don't do
drink whiskey, and model swimsuits all at the same time.
exactly.
everyone's
That's
going to
my
see
other
my
career.
tan
I didn't
line.
know, Dan, you found that. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing to Dan's point though is, and this is another thing that I kind of picked up while I was there, is that yeah, a lot of the folks that prefer video, they'll subscribe to the audio feed so that they can consume it on the go, but a lot of the consumption winds up happening on the video platforms. And so they do both.
Yeah,
It seems like a win-win for us, at least.
Yeah.
So. It's interesting. It means that you need to create your video content in such a way that it provides extra value when you're watching it, but still provides value if you're only listening to it. That's not necessarily a trivial thing to do.
Right. Well, that's where you have the whole like trend of people live coding, like on Twitch and stuff like that. And
how can you listen to live coding though?
You can't listen. That's what I'm saying, is like that is the visual appeal. If you want to like get something from a visual that is more than the conversation, I would say that arena is where things are happening, because they're projecting their screens up so you can see that they're speaking with you and they're going through concepts, and then they're coding through something and talking about that and giving you opinions and feedback and whatever, and reading a chat. Talk about like you have to be able to multitask. That's another thing.
Yeah, I know AJ does.
But you're right. It doesn't translate. It doesn't translate to audio only.
No, it doesn't. So I just think that's the other extreme, right?
Yeah.
So
I listen.
I
watch, for example, stuff that Theo puts out, and that's actually something that you could just listen to. So I actually think that Theo does it fairly well, being able to put out content that's consumable in both types of formats, and has value either way. But it's not an easy thing to do, I think.
Yeah.
Right. It's
I mean,
definitely
maybe
a
if you're just a visual learner and you want to hear conversation and remember it, and so seeing faces and reactions, like I don't know how much value our content necessarily adds, other than you can see our faces, you can see our guest face, you maybe associate what you're hearing, that you see the whiskey we're having, so that helps you remember what it is. But outside of that, I don't know. I mean, it's pretty loose in general. Obviously, after we get a commitment from the guest, we'll start to look at what whiskeys we've tried and what we are interested in and what kind of fits into the profile we think they may or may not like based on any feedback. If they just say, YOLO, then we'll pick something interesting that, I don't know. I like to pretend that I think about like, oh, what is the person working on, or what I know about them and what askews to their personality type in that. And then we do basic show notes. So, some things about their background, depending on if they write blogs or have other content, I'll kind of dig into some older things to see if there's any interesting subject matter, tech or non-tech, that we could bring up during the show that maybe they haven't talked about before. But outside of that, then it's just introduce themselves. We have a couple of like regular questions we ask, try the whiskey, and then it goes where it goes.
And how regular are you about putting out episodes?
Every week.
And
record and release.
And if you don't mind me asking, what's your backlog like?
In what way? Like how many?
Like for example, if for some reason in a certain week, like you're unable to record, I don't know, the guest has an emergency and doesn't make it, or one of you can't make it, or both of you can't make it, something like that. Like, does
Yeah, how
that
far
mean
ahead
then?
are you?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right now we're pretty far ahead because we did all those live ones at the conferences. So
Mm,
I think we were like a couple of months ahead. So we could like skip a
months.
bunch if we want. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like Chuck is gonna be on vacation for a couple of weeks. Or sorry, Charles. Don't want to confuse people.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, I don't want to confuse people.
But yeah,
Get a
so we're
third.
covered for that. But then like whenever we do have less of a backlog, Charles and I will just jump on and like do one with just us. Like we'll always make sure we fill that gap. So we're pretty good about doing that.
Yeah, we
Yep.
do the same. I think our backlog is currently about 3 or 4 weeks, isn't it, Chuck?
Yeah, it's about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It's a tricky balance to hit because some of the stuff we wind up talking about is somewhat timely.
Yeah.
The other thing is that if we want our guests to engage, then a lot of times if we wait too long, then it's kind of out of mind, and so then it's hard to get them to engage on social media and things like that. I think 3 to 4 weeks is kind of our sweet spot.
Yeah, it does create some problems sometimes. For example, we talked about it before. I don't recall if it was before or after we started recording, but we had Dan Abramov on our show talking about React server components, and he was actually like doing the rounds between all the main podcasts, and all of them really got him on as soon as he asked. And for us, for some reason, we told them, here's a schedule link. And the
Yeah.
only free slot was like 2 months away. And then it took another month for the episode to come out. So we were like almost 2 to 3 months after everybody else, which actually had a bit of an advantage, I think, in that particular case, for two reasons. First of all, it enabled us to kind of prepare, because I could actually listen to what he talked about on the other podcasts and come up with what I thought were interesting and in new questions that he hadn't asked before, and we actually were able to dive really deeply thanks to that. And the other thing is that sometimes when you have the same person speaking on all the podcasts at the same time, well, then it creates a problem of saturation. And we kind of had them at a separate time than everybody else, which I think was also potentially an advantage. But sometimes it does create a problem, like you said, Chuck, of not being timely. Like a person does want to talk ahead of a release event or something like that, of a new version, and it can be tricky sometimes.
Yeah, on some of those, what we've done is we've just rearranged the backlog, right? We've just said, okay, we'll just put this out next week.
Yeah, but it
Sometimes
can
we have a
get more
sponsored
challenging.
episode.
It can get more challenging
Same
if
deal.
we want to record them earlier than the schedule seems to allow.
Yeah. So there have been a few where, we've had somebody get back to us and say, it would be really great if you could release it on this particular week. Right. So we just accommodate it because our editor, and I don't know if you guys edit your own shows, but we have an editor that is paid by the sponsorships and stuff, and he usually is editing stuff, the week before it goes live. So it's not to the point where, it's like, well, I've edited these other two, right? I got to slot this in and hurry and get it done. He just does it as part of his normal course, and we just make sure that he knows a week in advance that this one's going, not that one.
Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable. And no, we don't edit our own. I'm not sure I could be trusted with that kind of thing.
With that kind of power.
Yeah, that's right. It may change in the future unless we go down the sponsorship path, but thus far we've been kind of.
Oh, you're going sponsorless?
So far, yeah. So we buy all our own whiskeys, we pay the editor, and all of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of irrelevant now, but we have a consultancy that like had money to pay for all of this before.
Yeah.
Now Chuck and I have real jobs, so or Charles and I. Sorry, I'm never going to get that right.
No, it's fine.
Other Chuck.
So wait a minute. Do you guys work together now or not in your day job?
No, we do not. Yeah, we did before. We've been running a consultancy for a few years together.
And what do you guys do now, if I may ask? And
I'm
feel free to not answer.
Yeah, a janitor.
Yeah, I'm a janitor.
I feel that sometimes.
You're a coach.
Yeah, that previously mentioned difficult job search. I mean, so we do what we got to do, Dan.
Yeah. No,
I have 5 kids. I feel like a
Amazon.
janitor. Oh, okay. That's fun.
Yeah, for Art19 specifically. So it's their podcast hosting platform they acquired. So there's a lot of synergy there, having a podcast and working for a podcast hosting company. So
that we don't use. That's irony.
Well, they don't let you use it. You can't, as a casual person, you can't go, I'd like to switch to this provider, and like no, it's like invite only kind of thing.
Yeah,
interesting.
So there we go. But Chuck has given us lots of insight into ways to improve our potential for sponsorship. So we've been exploring some things anyway. But
yeah, and I'm happy to talk about it offline too. So where are you a janitor at, Charles? Chuck?
I'm actually a janitor, not a janitor, but a engineering manager for a platform engineering team.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah, platform engineering is its own subset of things that people talk about in tech. So
yeah,
there's that as well,
and it means different things to different people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a machine learning show on Top End Devs and ML Ops. With some of that platform engineering, it gets really interesting. So.
Yeah, for sure. Especially depending upon how organizations define that and split work there. And, so many people think about it in the context of like SREs or something of that nature. And that's not always the case. There isn't always YAML in your life. Even though I like YAML. So, I'm a YAML advocate. So,
yeah. Might have to see if we can plug you into the Adventures in DevOps show too.
Oh, there we go. Totally. I'm down.
Terraform,
I've got a nice. Yeah. Well, that's controversial now, right? Is it OpenTF or Terraform or what? Where's that all going? Well, didn't the Cloud Native Foundation end up adopting OpenTF already or something like that?
I have no idea.
But it's interesting. Just from the technical side. I mean, are you Dockerized? Are you Kubernetes, Helm? Are you using some of those, and then something like Terraform to get what you want out of it?
That's what we do,
right? And then you have your whole secrets management, and then the other end of DevOps is what are your who are the people involved? What are your practices? What's your process look like? And oh man, it's really kind of fun to dig into. And then if you back it out far enough, it's like, okay, well, how much of this is influenced by things like agile development, or I mean, you go on and on and on. It's a fun area to be in. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What is your flavor of agile? Because agile doesn't necessarily mean Scrum, and
it's a waterfall every week. It's a new waterfall every 2 weeks.
You're hurting people's souls saying these things, but it's kind of true.
I mean, I think it's absolutely true. Go down and then there's places where agile is essentially lean and Kanban and workflow, work in progress flows and things like that too. So
I don't know. I just like having a title with the word master in it. Scrum Master.
I think it's almost ironic.
Oh, were you talking to me? Sorry.
I'm just kidding, by the way. I totally don't.
You are the master, isn't that?
Yeah,
it's a little different.
Right. Yeah, no. I don't want to be a master of anything. Maybe of my craft.
Right. We're kind of getting toward the end of the time that I have, so I'm gonna push us toward the way we wrap up, and and then maybe I don't know. How do you guys wrap up your show?
We usually ask the guests if they have anything they want to mention or plug, or that we didn't talk about, any last minute thing.
I assume that you end your show drunk under the table.
Yeah, that too. I mean, in my head, that's what I think we say, but in reality, it's a little more like like that.
Right. All
I can
right.
hold my liquor, Dan. It's
Yeah.
okay.
So if people want to follow the show, what are the best places to find your stuff and to find you guys?
This is Robbie's
Yeah.
part.
We're on whiskey.web and whatnot.fm. So you can find all of our other links on there. We have X and TikTok now. I don't know if TikTok links on there. We're trying to do all the new cool hip things.
Instagram.
And I don't know what I'm doing yet.
I don't know.
So
yeah, we're figuring that out. Again, we need sponsors. These paths.
So basically, you want to sell your souls, okay?
I am for sale.
To capitalism.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we all
absolutely.
are. I mean,
right. All right. Well, the way we end it is we do picks, and picks are kind of the self promo. You can throw those in there too. But yeah, it's just anything you're really enjoying, liking, want to shout out about, whatever. Dan, why don't you start us with picks?
Okay, will do. So I have two associated picks. The first pick I have is I mentioned that I just got back from a conference. It was on August 31st and September 1st. It was a front conference in Zurich. It was great in special in that it kind of brings developers and designers together. So you have kind of intersection of technology and design, and things that I learned about things that I usually don't learn about, and it was really interesting in that context, and had also a lot very diverse set of speakers and the audience, and it was a really cool venue and well organized conference, and I enjoyed it a lot, and it's also in lovely Zurich, so what's not to like? Um, and what's associated with it is that a lot of the talks that I was there were actually about CSS. And it turns out, we keep talking in the front end realm. We talk about frameworks and we talk about meta frameworks and not and whatnot. But it seems to me that recently the real cool things are happening in CSS. And what's really nice is that it's been stagnant. It seemed like being stagnant for a while, and then all of a sudden it's making this big push. And what's really cool about it is that it seems to be supported by all the vendors. So a lot of these things either already have wide support really quickly after being announced, or are in the process of getting wide support. So you're not just seeing all these cool features that you can't use, but you will actually be able to use all of them in a few months. And if some browser or platform still doesn't support them, well, in most cases, there's also really graceful degradation. For example, with view transitions, is the ability to create really slick animated transitions between pages, things that could have been possible previously only with JavaScript on top of single page applications, and even then with a lot of work, can now be done really nicely with just CSS on top of single page applications or multi page applications. Now, it's not quite done there. I think it's currently only supported in Chrome, but it seems like the other browsers will support it as well. And it degrades very gracefully in the sense that you just don't get that transition, but you still get that page navigation. And there are some really cool examples online. Some frameworks like Astro 3 recently came out. They've actually added built-in support for it, which makes it extremely easy to use from within your framework with very little coding, and and works well with components, and it's really nice. Other things in that context that can be mentioned are container queries, which for years everybody thought they were kind of impossible to do properly, and then the CSS working group figured out how to do them, and now we're getting them in all the browsers, and they're extremely cool. And something new in that context that I learned more or less today is CSS anchor positioning, which enables you to position elements relative to each other. So you can actually have one div automatically placed relative to just below another div, and if that div moves, so does this one. And you can even have the positioning specified in such a way that it tries to be inside the viewport. So think about positioning a menu relative to a button, and that menu will always try to be inside the viewport, like like native menus. Really cool stuff. CSS would be my pick, and everything cool that's happening with it. And finally, I always mention the ongoing war in Ukraine. Do whatever you can to help the people of Ukraine, because that war is still ongoing. And those are my picks for today.
Awesome. I'm going to throw out my picks, and then we'll have our guests go ahead with theirs. The first pick that I have, I always do a board game pick. And so if I've played something new, then I'll pick that. And if I haven't, then I'll pick something that's one of my favorites. So the pick that I have this week, it's a card game. It's called Canvas. Came out in 2021. And effectively what you're doing is you have three paintings that you're trying to build. And so you pick cards that have certain elements on them. And then there are like 5, what are they? They're symbols on the bottom in the different colors. So there are 5 colors at the bottom of the card. And you slide them into sleeves on the canvas. And so you can stack them. You stack 3, and then your painting's done, is the way that it works. So once you have 5 cards, you have to paint your painting. You can paint it before if you have what you want. And then there are cards that tell you what the different symbols score at. And so you put your painting together. And when you're done, your painting will have a name, right? Because it has a little slot for the name, which is just kind of fun. And you're supposed to explain to the other people you're playing with what the story is behind the painting. And you have all kinds of bizarre stuff on it, which is fun. But ultimately, yeah, you're trying to build this painting so that you get the best score. And the score is based on those symbols at the bottom that tell you what elements and how high art your painting is. And it was fun. Played it with some really good friends of mine, generally the people that I'm playing these games with. Board Game Geek has a weight on it of 1.65, which means that it's very approachable to casual gamers. You can play 1 to 5 players. We played it with 5. It was pretty fun. Anyway, there is an element of you have to pull the first card in the in the row, unless you have a palette. And if you have a palette, you give up your palette to skip to the next one. So you can do 2 or 3 or 4 palettes and get all the way to the 5th card. And anyway, it was a lot of fun. We had a good time playing it. These are people that we've played games with for years, my wife and I, and so we all the inside jokes and everything else that goes on with that kind of a thing. So I'm going to pick that. We talked a little bit about podcast gear and kind of the mobile setup. So I'm going to pick one of the things that I actually just bought this. I haven't actually been able to play with it yet. So I might pick it again so that I can tell you all how it worked. But there's a 4-channel wireless lavalier mic system that you can get. I got the one that'll hook up to your phone, but I also have a DSLR camera that a lot of times I'll be taking with me to some of these conferences, because at this point I want the video as well. Before that, I had a Zoom H6, which is a recorder. It records the SD card. But now that I want the audio, or the video, I'm looking at how to take the camera with me. Anyway, it was not cheap. It was $400. But yeah, it's all wireless and pretty easy to set up and use. I'm also planning on doing some YouTube stuff with my kids, and so that's going to be a piece of that as well, because I have a green screen. If you've watched some of the other videos, you've seen it behind me when I'm recording a podcast. But I'm actually going to be setting it up and lighting it over there, and then I'll have some other stuff behind me here when I'm recording, sitting at my desk. But because I'm moving my office, I think I might have mentioned that before. But anyway, so it just looks like a great way to go, because I can just clip it onto people and we can just talk. And yeah, it may not be as high quality as taking some roadcasters or things like that wherever we're going, but it's portable, it's easy, and right, I can just hook it up to the DSLR camera, record the whole thing. So anyway, so those are my two picks. I did get something else that I'm going to be using for my triathlon training, but I'll pick that next week because I want to try it out first. I don't think I have anything else that I want to shout out about at this point, other than that you can go check out. I'm actually going to start releasing courses here within the next few weeks on Top End Dev, so if you want to go check that out, you can do that. Robbie, you have some picks?
Yeah, I guess I would pick the desk that I am sitting at right now. It is since I just recently moved, I've gotten some new furniture and things. This is the B-Flow tenon desk. It's a standing desk, but it also has like a lot of built-in cord management and stuff like that. So I'm very pleased with, like, as being a person who usually just has cords everywhere and like not managing that. I like that it has a lot of ways to keep all that in check. So definitely check it out. It's also not cheap, but I think it's worth it. So, and that's all I got.
Nice.
It's your only pick.
You're not going to pick any whiskey?
I mean, I could. We like all of the barrel whiskeys. I think the Dovetail is my favorite one they make, Barrel Craft Spirits. Check that one out. It's in, I think, Cabernet barrels and like a couple other kind of barrels or something. So it's pretty tasty.
Nice. Charles the Third.
That's right. My first pick is long names. No, just kidding. So yeah, I was going to say the first pick's just because we recently upgraded our cameras and lenses. So I'll go ahead and pick the Sony A7 III. I also picked up the 28 millimeter Sony lens. And I've been very happy with that setup with all kinds of lighting conditions. That works pretty well in low light. And with specific lighting setups, seems to be working pretty good thus far. And my other pick would be, just because it's occupied so much of my mind share over this last month, I'm a big soccer fan, and in particular the European leagues, the Premier League. This was a big summer transfer ending month. Just ended on the 31st, so Manchester United Football Club is in my mind often. Unfortunately, after this weekend, it is grumpily in my mind. So my third pick will be also whiskey, which will be the Sagamore Rye, which is our tried and true friend. We did a barrel pick last year with that particular one, and often recommend it to folks because it's very approachable price-wise, like around $35 or so, and delicious. So those are my picks.
Very cool. I have to poke the soccer bear for a minute.
Don't tell me you're a Liverpool fan.
No, in fact, I mostly just figured out that I can watch Serie A soccer. So I lived in Italy for a couple of years, and yeah, I'm a Juventus man
too. So. I was gonna say I'm an Inter
man
because it was in 2009. I was at the San Siro. It was my first in-person match, European match. So always a special place in my heart there.
Right.
Jose Mourinho was there, and it was just incredible. So they're kind of my number 2 team.
Yeah, I haven't been to a European match in 21, 22 years. The one that we got to go to was Verona versus Venezia, and they were playing in Verona, which is where I lived. So anyway, it was very fun. People were lighting stuff on
close
fire
to the balcony.
It was wild.
Yeah,
Chuck, did you live close to the balcony?
Live close. What do you mean?
Is it
Juliet's balcony?
Dear Verona.
Yeah.
The beginning of Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, so that stuff's all kind of in the downtown area. We lived a little ways outside.
Northern Italy is lovely.
Yeah, 5-minute bike ride, I think, from there is where we lived.
Nice.
Well, like I said, Northern Italy is a beautiful place. Lake Garda, Lake Como.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Como.
Yeah, we rode our bikes. I should probably end the show, but we rode our bikes on Christmas morning. We all got up, took the train out to this little isthmus and dock on Lake Como, and we just rode out on the lake and then rode back. It was awesome. But yeah, beautiful areas. Yeah, I lived in Verona and Pordenone. I also lived in Arezzo, which is in Tuscany. It's in the middle of Tuscany, and that was gorgeous too.
I have to say one thing about that area. So we visited there a while back when my daughter was something like 8 years old, and she goes, "Dad, it's not fair that they have such beautiful scenery and such beautiful houses."
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks for coming, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and I'm waiting to get invited in to drink some whiskey.
Yeah, we'll work it out.
Hint,
For
hint,
sure.
nudge, nudge.
Figure out the
scheduled.
international
Yeah.
shipping.
The logistics is always the hardest part, but
Yeah.
we'll work it out. We'll chat.
All right.
Yeah, I'm
Good deal.
counting on it. Yeah. In any event, it was great having you guys on. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So we'll wrap it. Till next time, max out, everybody.